Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, two of the most iconic names in music history, but behind the sold-out concerts, award shows, and flashing cameras was a bond that no one could fully understand. To the world, they were mentor and student, friends, maybe even family. But to Michael, she was something more, something he could never quite put into words. He once described Diana as mother, sister, and lover, all combined in one, a confession that shocked even his closest friends. For over 4 decades, whispers surrounded their connection. Were they secretly in love? Was it obsession? Or was it something even deeper that blurred the lines between family and romance? From the moment they met in 1969 to Michael's final will in 2009, Diana's presence shaped his life in ways the public never knew. And even at 81, Diana Ross finally revealed the truth she had carried in silence for half a century. But the story of their relationship wasn't just love and loyalty. It was filled with heartbreak, scandal, broken promises, and one decision Michael made that left the world stunned. The story began in 1969 when the Jackson 5 arrived at Motown, a label already bursting with legends. Michael was just 11 years old, a shy child with a voice powerful enough to silence an entire room. Berry Gordy, the mastermind behind Motown, believed this boy could be the next James Brown, the next Sammy Davis Jr., maybe even bigger, but Gordy knew talent alone wasn't enough. To make the Jackson 5 shine, they needed the perfect introduction. That's where Diana Ross came in. She was already the queen of Motown, the glamorous face of the Supremes, and Gordy arranged for her to introduce the group to the world, as though she had discovered them herself. It was a publicity stunt, but for Michael, it felt like destiny. From the very first moment, Michael was captivated. He admired Diana's beauty, her presence, the way she commanded attention without even trying. And soon, admiration grew into something deeper. Within a year, Michael was living in Diana's Los Angeles home. He called her Mama, shadowed her every move, and teased his sisters that they'd only be pretty if they looked like her. His mother, Katherine Jackson, later admitted in her memoir that she felt uneasy. Michael talked about Diana as if she was a second mother, but also something else, something harder to define. The bond didn't fit neatly into the roles of family or friendship. Even at 11, there were shades of attachment that felt far more complicated. And when Diana brought Michael onto her 1971 TV special, gently coaching him, teaching him how to move with confidence, how to charm the camera, it wasn't just mentorship. It was a passing of the torch. A star showing the boy she believed could outshine the world how to survive an industry that devoured innocence. For Michael, Diana's belief in him became his lifeline. Years later, when he tried to explain his feelings, he put it into one unforgettable line. She's mother, sister, and lover, all combined in one. It was a confession no one quite knew how to process, and it set the tone for a bond that would blur lines, spark rumors, and haunt them both for the rest of their lives. By the late 1970s, Michael was no longer just the child star of the Jackson 5. He was 19 years old, caught between boyhood and manhood, desperate to discover who he was outside of Motown's grip. That chance came in 1977 when he landed his first major movie role in The Wiz, a bold remake of The Wizard of Oz. The cast was a dream for Black Hollywood at the time. Lena Horne, Richard Pryor, and at the center of it all, Diana Ross as Dorothy. Michael, still shy and unsure of himself, was cast as the Scarecrow. To outsiders, it looked like a career step, but to Michael, it was something much bigger. Day after day in Diana's presence. The film was shot in New York, far away from Motown's polished image makers and Berry Gordy's watchful eye. For the first time, Michael and Diana shared a rhythm of long rehearsals, private dinners, and late-night conversations that carried on until morning. Crew members noticed how inseparable they became. Whispers spread across the set about Diana staying at Michael's apartment long past midnight. No one ever confirmed what happened behind those doors. Neither of them ever explained it, but the closeness was undeniable. Diana herself once joked with friends on set, "One thing's for sure, Michael isn't gay." A simple line, but one that only fueled the speculation. When The Wiz premiered, critics called it bloated, even a failure, but Michael didn't care. What mattered to him wasn't the box office. It was the bond he had carved out with Diana, away from the cameras, away from the noise. In her company, he felt safe. He told friends she was the one person who understood his insecurities, the only person who gave him permission to be imperfect. Even the film's music carried an undertone. When Michael and Diana sang Ease On Down the Road together, the chemistry was undeniable. It wasn't just performance, it looked and sounded like two people sharing a secret the audience wasn't meant to know. For Michael, it wasn't romance in the traditional sense. It was something he carried in silence, stronger than friendship, too complicated to explain, but powerful enough to anchor him in the chaos of fame. And as the 1980s began, Michael was preparing for a transformation that would make him the most famous entertainer alive. But before he could step into that spotlight, he made a confession that stunned the world. By the early 1980s, Michael Jackson was stepping out of boyhood and into superstardom. Off the Wall had already proven he wasn't just the kid from the Jackson 5, he was a star in his own right. But even as the flashing lights followed him everywhere, one constant remained: Diana Ross. In 1982, during an interview with Ebony magazine, Michael finally said the words he had been carrying for years. His voice trembled, but his message was clear. It's Diana Ross. I love her. He didn't hide behind metaphors. He didn't disguise it in lyrics. He said it plainly, even confessing that he dreamed of marrying her. The world was stunned. Michael was in his early 20s. Diana was in her late 30s. The 14-year age gap made their dynamic unusual, even controversial. To some, it looked like youthful infatuation. To others, it was proof of an attachment that had crossed invisible lines years earlier. But to Michael, this was no teenage crush. It was a love he had nurtured since childhood, and now he was bold enough to admit it. What the public didn't know was that behind closed doors, Diana had promised him marriage, not once but reportedly twice. Friends claimed she even wore his ring in public. And at the 1984 American Music Awards, Diana made the world gasp when she kissed Michael on the lips in front of millions, cradling his face in her hands as though daring everyone to see what they had kept private for so long. For Michael, that moment felt like victory, proof that the woman he adored had chosen him. But reality struck quickly. His mother, Katherine Jackson, openly disapproved. She believed Diana was too old and warned that the relationship would damage Michael's image. Meanwhile, the press branded Diana with cruel labels, calling her a cradle robber and worse. Under that pressure, Diana pulled back. Instead of standing by Michael, she chose another path. In 1985, she married Norwegian businessman Arne Næss Jr. For Michael, it was devastating. He didn't attend the wedding. Friends later described him as withdrawn, avoiding the studio, refusing interviews, and telling those closest to him quietly, "I loved her, and I always will." To the outside world, Michael was rising higher than ever, on his way to becoming the king of pop. But inside, he was mourning the loss of the only woman he had ever truly loved. And soon, that heartbreak would bleed into his music, creating one of the most controversial songs of his career. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jackson wasn't just famous, he was untouchable. Thriller had shattered every record in music history, and he was now the most recognizable entertainer on the planet. Yet even as the lights of superstardom surrounded him, one thing lingered quietly in the background: the wound left by Diana Ross. He had watched her marry Arne Næss Jr. and start a new family, but no matter how far he rose, the thought of her remained a constant shadow in his heart. Michael's way of dealing with pain had always been through music, and in 1987, his heartbreak took shape in one of the most controversial songs of his career, Dirty Diana. On the surface, he insisted it was about aggressive groupies who chased rock stars backstage, but the lyrics carried a venom and bitterness that felt too personal to ignore. The timing was suspicious, and the words described a woman who played with love and used it as a weapon. To fans and insiders alike, the song seemed less like a warning about groupies and more like a direct shot at Diana Ross. Even Quincy Jones, his trusted producer, reportedly begged Michael to change the lyrics, warning him that people would assume it was about her. Michael softened one verse, but the pain in his voice remained. He sang it as if he was exorcising a wound that never healed. To anyone paying close attention, this was no fictional story. It was the echo of heartbreak he couldn't say out loud. Diana's reaction was explosive. Furious at what she believed was a betrayal, she cut off contact with Michael, refusing to return his calls for weeks. For a man as sensitive as Michael, her silence was crushing. He confided in friends that he felt torn apart, desperate for her approval, yet powerless to stop channeling his feelings into the only outlet he had ever known: music. Eventually, Diana broke the silence. In public, she laughed it off, even making jokes about Dirty Diana during her own live shows, teasing audiences by turning the controversy into entertainment. But behind closed doors, the tension between them was undeniable. Their bond was no longer simple. It had become a strange cycle of closeness and jealousy. Whenever Michael tried to move forward, Diana had a way of pulling him back. When he was photographed with Madonna, suddenly Diana was there again, sitting on his lap at parties and monopolizing his attention. At award shows, she would flirt openly with him, clinging on stage, blowing kisses, and making sure no one forgot the connection they shared, even if Michael had walked in with another woman. Friends who witnessed these moments began to call it a silent war, a push and pull that neither of them could seem to escape. In 1988, Michael tried once more to put his feelings into words. In his autobiography, Moonwalk, he admitted the truth he had carried since childhood. "I've always loved Diana Ross, and I always will." It was both a declaration and a surrender. She was his greatest source of comfort, but also the deepest wound he would ever carry. And just as their complicated bond settled into this volatile rhythm, Michael's life was about to be tested by something far darker than heartbreak, a scandal that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The 1990s brought storms that Michael Jackson could not dance away from. In 1993, the first public accusations of child abuse shook the world. A 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler, along with his father, accused Michael of unthinkable acts. Overnight, the world's most adored entertainer became the center of a global scandal. The police raided Neverland, helicopters followed his every move, and the media replayed every rumor until it seemed like his career might collapse entirely. While business partners pulled away and celebrities distanced themselves, one person remained steadfast in his life: Diana Ross. She didn't speak loudly to the press, but behind the scenes, she called him, visited him, and made sure he knew she believed in his innocence. At a time when even some members of his own family began to waver, Diana never did. When Michael's sister LaToya publicly made damning statements against him, later revealed to be coerced by her abusive husband, Diana ignored the noise. To her, Michael wasn't the monster the tabloids painted him to be. He was still the boy she had once taken into her home, the man whose heart she had known for decades. Her presence in his life wasn't just symbolic. In 1995, when Michael collapsed during a rehearsal and was rushed to the hospital, Diana arrived at his bedside. Witnesses described how the mood in the room shifted when she walked in. Michael, pale and exhausted, relaxed the moment she took his hand. At that time, he was married to Lisa Marie Presley, but even she was asked to leave when Diana entered the room. It was a quiet, unspoken reminder of the role Diana occupied in his life, one that no wife, girlfriend, or friend could ever replace. The storms only grew darker. In 2003, the world watched the now infamous documentary Living with Michael Jackson by journalist Martin Bashir. In it, Michael admitted to allowing children to sleep in his bedroom, sparking fresh outrage. Soon after, new charges were filed. In 2005, Michael stood trial in Santa Maria, California, facing accusations that could have ended his freedom forever. The trial dragged on for months, grueling testimony, tabloid circus coverage, and a prosecution determined to bring down the king of pop. Many in the entertainment world stayed silent, afraid to be connected to him. But once again, Diana Ross did not turn her back. She didn't make loud, defiant speeches, but her loyalty never wavered. Friends close to Michael said he found strength in knowing she still believed in him. To her, Michael was not just another star engulfed in scandal. He was the same boy she had championed since 1969, the man she knew was misunderstood, and the artist she had always stood beside. In June 2005, after months of relentless headlines, Michael was acquitted on all counts. He walked free, but the damage to his reputation was lasting. The world was divided. Some still adored him, others never forgave. But through it all, Diana remained in his corner. She didn't need to prove it to the public. Her loyalty was private, personal, and rooted in 4 decades of history. And as the years wore on, that bond would show itself one final time in a decision Michael made before his death that left the world stunned. On June 25, 2009, the world froze. Michael Jackson had died suddenly in Los Angeles, and fans everywhere mourned the loss of a legend. For Diana Ross, though, it wasn't just the death of an icon. It was the loss of someone who had once looked at her as his entire universe. Her statement was brief but raw. "I can't stop crying. This is too sudden and shocking. My heart is hurting." Soon after, his will revealed a truth no one expected. If his mother Catherine could not care for his children, custody would go to Diana Ross, not his siblings, not Debbie Rowe, not anyone else. To Michael, the choice was obvious. She had raised 5 kids of her own, had stood by him when the world turned against him, and had never betrayed his trust. Years later, when Leaving Neverland reignited controversy, Diana publicly defended him, tweeting, "I believe and trust that Michael Jackson was and is a magnificent, incredible force to me and to many others." At 81, she finally admitted what she had carried in silence. "Michael loved me in a way that's not easy to name. She cared for him deeply, but said his love was too fragile, too sacred to ever mirror fully." Their story was never a simple romance, never just mentorship. It was devotion mixed with distance, loyalty mixed with heartbreak. And through it all, one thing never changed. Michael's love for Diana shaped his art, haunted his heart, and even lived on in his final wishes. The question that remains is the one no one can answer. Did he ever find peace in the love he carried for her? For over 40 years, the bond between Michael Jackson and Diana Ross remained one of music's greatest mysteries. It wasn't a simple love story, nor was it just mentorship. It was something far more complicated, a mix of admiration, heartbreak, promises, and silence. Michael himself once admitted she was mother, sister, and lover all in one, and even at the height of his fame, she was still the person he trusted above all others. From their first encounter in 1969 to his final will in 2002, Diana Ross was the one constant in his life, the woman who shaped him, comforted him, and left an imprint he never escaped. Even after his passing, her words revealed the truth. Michael's love for her was real, deep, and lasting, even if it could never be fully returned. But maybe that's what makes their story so haunting. It wasn't complete, it wasn't clean, but it was unforgettable. A love that was never fully realized, yet powerful enough to follow him to his final days. And now, the question is yours. Do you believe Diana truly loved Michael back? Or was she the wound he could never heal from? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because we've got more untold stories of music legends coming your way.